Can narcissism ever be healthy? Psychology draws the line. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into a topic that is messy, controversial, and hits close to home for so many of us. Narcissism. I know, heavy word, right? But stick with me because we're not just talking about the textbook definition. We're tackling the massive viral question that keeps popping up online. Can narcissism, in any way, shape, or form, actually be healthy? It sounds impossible, a total contradiction, like saying a toxic relationship is good for your soul. But the discussion around self-love, high confidence, and knowing your worth has blurred the lines so much that many people genuinely believe there's a good version of being self-obsessed. Let's unpack the psychology behind this myth and find out where the true danger lies for all of us. To start, let's be crystal clear about why this confusion exists in the first place. When someone is truly confident, the kind of person who walks into a room and instantly commands respect, they often seem to possess some traits that, on the surface, look a little narcissistic. They have high self-esteem, they advocate fiercely for themselves, and they definitely aren't suffering from imposter syndrome. Society often rewards this boldness, telling us, "You have to be your own biggest fan." But there is a canyon, a massive, uncrossable chasm between self-assured confidence and genuine narcissistic personality disorder, or even just high-level narcissistic traits. We need to define those boundaries right now before we go any further into the nuance, because understanding the difference could genuinely change how you manage your relationships and your own self-development journey moving forward. Think about healthy confidence for a moment. What does it involve? It means knowing your strengths and weaknesses. It means having an accurate, realistic assessment of your abilities and feeling secure in that knowledge without needing external validation every 5 minutes. A confident person celebrates their successes, absolutely, but they can also take constructive criticism without feeling personally attacked or dissolving into defensiveness and rage. Most importantly, healthy confidence doesn't require tearing other people down to feel tall. It's an internal fuel source, generated by competence and self-acceptance, not an external validation mechanism based on applause. Keep that image in your mind. Secure, realistic, and empathetic. That is the blueprint for true, sustainable self-assurance that benefits both you and everyone around you in the long run. Now, let's flip the script and talk about the N word. When we discuss narcissism, and I mean the clinical or even subclinical traits, we are fundamentally talking about an inability to regulate one's self-esteem internally. The narcissist doesn't truly love themselves. They desperately need external affirmation to maintain a fragile, idealized image of themselves, often called the false self. They need constant admiration, and they lack something fundamental that is necessary for healthy human connection: empathy. This isn't just about being a little self-centered. It's a deep-seated relational dysfunction where others are viewed not as human beings with needs, but as objects or sources of supply to feed that perpetually hungry, fragile ego. It's a fundamental difference in how they navigate the world and their most intimate connections. The biggest characteristic that separates the two is often grandiosity and entitlement. And this is where the conflict becomes most obvious. A highly confident person might say, "I deserve this promotion because I worked hard, I delivered results, and I led a successful team." A narcissistic person feels entitled to the promotion simply because they are them, and therefore inherently superior. They believe the rules don't apply, that they are unique, special, and should be treated as such, demanding preferential treatment everywhere they go. This inherent entitlement poisons every interaction, making them poor collaborators and even worse romantic partners. They aren't just bold, they feel owed. And that gap between their inflated expectation and harsh reality is where the toxicity truly festers, damaging their relationships and their own ability to cope with life's inevitable disappointments. And hey, we also need to remember that not all narcissists are loud, flashy, and grandiose in the ways we see in movies. There's a quieter, often more dangerous type, the vulnerable or covert narcissist. This person still requires the same level of special treatment and lacks empathy, but they achieve their supply through victimhood, passive aggression, and emotional manipulation. They might seem insecure and overly sensitive, even fragile, but beneath that thin skin is the same entitled core, constantly demanding that others cater to their delicate emotional needs while offering little genuine reciprocity or support in return. This style of behavior is often mistaken for extreme anxiety or deep sensitivity, making them incredibly difficult to spot in professional or personal settings until their toxic patterns are completely established and entrenched in your life. So, back to the big question: can narcissism be healthy? The short answer is a resounding, definitive no. However, the reason people keep talking about healthy narcissism is because researchers noticed that some traits, like assertiveness, high ambition, and the ability to maintain focus under pressure, are certainly beneficial. But here's the kicker: these beneficial traits are precisely what we call healthy confidence or ego strength, not narcissism. When you add the core components of genuine narcissism, lack of empathy, pervasive grandiosity, and exploitation, the whole psychological structure becomes inherently unhealthy and toxic, regardless of how much superficial success it manages to generate in the short term. The success is often built on exploiting the labor and goodwill of others, which is unsustainable. Think about the corporate world, since it's often held up as an example of where narcissism thrives. We often see highly successful, cutthroat CEOs who exhibit strong narcissistic tendencies. They make tough, emotionless decisions, they are ruthless, and they climb the ladder quickly because they are willing to step on anyone. People look at that dazzling success and say, "See, narcissism works." But look closer at the true cost. While that initial drive might get them to the top, genuine narcissism fundamentally erodes trust, alienates loyal employees, and creates a toxic work environment that eventually leads to high turnover, massive internal strife, and often scandalous ethical or financial failures. Short-term gains are rarely worth the long-term, systemic damage to the organization and the people who actually power it. It's like using explosive, volatile fuel, powerful for a second, but it burns the whole engine out and leaves devastation in its wake. The absolute deal-breaker, the thing that makes true narcissism fundamentally incompatible with psychological health, is the empathy deficit. Healthy human connection, which is crucial for mental, emotional, and even physical well-being, relies on the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, to see the world through their eyes, even briefly. Narcissism strips this away, viewing people instrumentally, only in terms of what they can provide. How can your relationships, whether professional or romantic, be considered healthy when you literally cannot access the emotional reality of the person sitting across from you? This absence of genuine care means that every interaction is purely transactional, designed only to serve the narcissist's needs, leading inevitably to deep emotional burnout for everyone around them. It's also important to realize that narcissistic behaviors are often deep-rooted defense mechanisms designed to manage profound internal pain. The grandiosity isn't confidence. It's a massive shield covering deep, searing insecurity and shame that the person cannot bear to look at. They can't handle criticism because it threatens to expose the deep vulnerability beneath the carefully constructed facade. So they attack. They project blame onto others, or they relentlessly manipulate the narrative to protect that incredibly fragile inner core. If the behaviors are rooted in deep fragility and chronic defense, how can they ever be considered healthy or strong? Healthy coping mechanisms involve self-reflection, accepting responsibility, and genuine growth, the exact opposites of what a person entrenched in narcissistic patterns is capable of doing without intensive, long-term therapeutic intervention. If you've ever been close to a genuinely narcissistic person, and I know many of you watching have shared your stories with me, you recognize the painful cycle they inflict on others. It starts, notoriously, with idealization. You are the most perfect, amazing, unique person they have ever met. They put you high up on a fragile pedestal. This feels incredible, right? It feels like intense, passionate, soulmate love. But the moment you fail to meet their impossible standard, or you express a healthy boundary, the inevitable devaluation phase hits with shocking speed. Suddenly, you are the worst human being alive, the source of all their personal problems, and completely disposable. This emotional whiplash, this rapid transition from heaven to hell, is psychologically devastating. Healthy relationships are stable, reciprocal, and mutually supportive, not exhausting roller coaster rides powered solely by someone else's desperate ego needs. This relentless, inherent need to maintain the perfect image also leads to destructive perfectionism and control. Because the narcissist cannot admit fault, they will expend enormous amounts of energy controlling their entire environment and the narrative surrounding them. This drive for control is exhausting for them internally and is highly oppressive to everybody else in their orbit. It's not the healthy desire to do a good job or produce quality work. It's the pathological, existential fear that if they slip up even once, their entire false identity will completely crumble. This crippling anxiety and rigidity severely limit growth, innovation, and relational trust. Healthy confidence allows for failure as a valuable learning experience. Narcissism views failure as a catastrophic personal indictment, leading only to denial and aggressive deflection of blame. So, where does that necessary overlap exist? The traits that genuinely make people successful, like being highly ambitious, having high self-efficacy, believing you can accomplish tasks, and resilience in the face of setbacks, are absolutely essential for thriving in life. These traits often overlap with the superficial markers of narcissism, yes, but they operate from a place of secure inner worth, not desperate external validation or exploitation. The key takeaway here, for all of you who are striving for success and wanting to be self-assured, is to develop those high-achieving traits while rigorously cultivating empathy, humility, and accountability. That combination, the strength to succeed paired with the moral capacity to care for others, is the true power move in both life and business. If you want to move toward genuine self-love, the healthy, sustainable alternative to fragile narcissistic behavior, it begins with radical self-acceptance. You accept your inevitable flaws. You accept that sometimes you are completely wrong and owe an apology. You accept that you need other people in your life and that they are valuable, unique individuals completely separate from your personal needs. This is the solid foundation of mental health and strong relationships. It's about grounding your self-worth in reality, not some elaborate fantasy of superiority. It's about loving the whole package, the messy parts and the good parts, without requiring applause from strangers or demanding constant, exhausting validation from your partners or colleagues. We also need to talk about the way the internet throws the word narcissist around these days, because it's becoming a huge problem. It has become lazy shorthand for jerk, selfish person, or my ex. While a person can certainly be selfish, rude, or annoying, using serious clinical terms too loosely diminishes the real, traumatic struggle for people dealing with true NPD, and, even more importantly, makes it much harder to accurately identify the crucial line between normal selfishness and genuine, chronic, toxic manipulation. Not every painful breakup involves a true narcissist. Sometimes it's simply two incompatible people with poor communication skills. Be careful with your language. Precision matters when discussing serious, pervasive behavioral patterns that affect real people. It's also crucial to understand that these behaviors exist on a spectrum, not a simple on/off switch. Very few people are 100% pathologically narcissistic, and very few are 100% perfectly saintly and selfless. Most of us have moments where we are defensive, maybe a little self-centered, or forget to consider someone else's feelings because we are stressed. The real danger zone isn't having a bad day or making a mistake. The danger zone is when grandiosity, lack of empathy, and entitlement become chronic, pervasive, and define your entire relational style. If exploitation and the need for constant ego supply are the consistent baseline of your interaction with the world, you are firmly entering toxic territory, regardless of whether you meet the full clinical diagnostic criteria or not. If we are assessing the health of a personality trait, we must look beyond the immediate benefits to the individual and rigorously examine the impact they have on their surroundings. Narcissism is, at its core, a relational disorder. It's a pattern of behavior that consistently exploits, abuses, or neglects the fundamental emotional needs of others simply to regulate the self. Can a trait that systemically causes deep emotional pain, trauma, lasting insecurity, and exhaustion in those closest to the person ever be considered healthy? Absolutely not. The emotional damage inflicted upon partners, children, and colleagues is, frankly, the loudest, most undeniable argument against the entire healthy narcissist theory that gets floated around online. For those of you dealing with a narcissistic personality in your life, whether it's a boss, a family member, or a partner, understanding the dynamic and its profound limitations is the first, crucial step towards self-preservation. The critical next step is establishing firm, unwavering boundaries and enforcing them consistently. Because they lack empathy, they will test those boundaries constantly, pushing back and trying to guilt you. You must remain consistent for your own sake. Remember, you cannot fix them, and you certainly cannot outlogic them into caring. Your only job is to protect your peace and your sanity from their relentless demands for supply and control. Your well-being is paramount and must be guarded fiercely. If these patterns sound familiar in your own life, or if you find yourself struggling constantly to get necessary validation and feeling emotionally exhausted in your interactions, please strongly consider speaking to a qualified mental health professional. For the individual struggling with narcissistic traits, true, sustainable change requires deep introspection and a willingness to confront that fragile inner core, which is often too painful to face alone. For those recovering from narcissistic abuse, therapy is absolutely vital for rebuilding damaged self-worth, processing trauma, and learning healthy relational patterns that were severely damaged by the toxic environment you were surviving in. Another quick but vital caution point, especially in the age of rapid information sharing. Please do not use these descriptions we've discussed today to definitively diagnose anyone, including yourself, with a complex personality disorder. These deep personality structures require careful, professional assessment by trained clinicians. Use this information as a tool for understanding behavior, for protecting yourself from exploitation, and for recognizing patterns, but not as a weapon or a definitive diagnostic label. If you are noticing persistent, toxic patterns in yourself or someone close to you, seek professional guidance and expertise, rather than just relying on viral TikTok videos for definitive answers about psychological health. The true goal for all of us is to cultivate a healthy ego, an inner sense of competence and worth that is robust enough to handle the inevitable rejections, setbacks, and failures of life without crumbling, but flexible enough to graciously acknowledge when others are right or when you've made a significant mistake. This healthy ego celebrates its own achievements without needing to dim the spotlight on anyone else, and it seeks genuine connection over control. It's grounded, it's quiet in its power, it's strong. It's everything that genuine, fragile narcissism desperately pretends to be, but can never truly achieve without radical emotional work and deep therapeutic effort. Remember that every healthy, functioning relationship, whether with a partner, friend, or coworker, is built on reciprocity, a consistent give and take where both parties feel valued. Narcissism destroys reciprocity because the focus is always on taking, demanding, and consuming emotional supply from others. A confident person gives freely and receives graciously. A narcissistic person takes aggressively and rarely, if ever, returns the favor or expresses true gratitude. Pay attention to the emotional balance in your relationships. If you are consistently the one giving, validating, excusing, and accommodating poor behavior, that's a massive red flag signaling an unhealthy, toxic imbalance that needs immediate and serious attention for the sake of your own well-being. To wrap up the distinction one last time, confidence is rooted in secure self-knowledge and is outward-looking, concerned with competence and genuine connection. Narcissism is rooted in deep insecurity and is intensely inward-looking, concerned only with maintaining a fictional, protective image of superiority at all costs. One is a pathway to fulfillment, resilience, and mutual respect in your life. The other is a lonely, destructive road paved with exploited relationships and chronic emotional exhaustion. Don't be fooled by short-term success or superficial charisma. True psychological health and self-mastery are ultimately measured by the quality, depth, and resilience of your most crucial human connections. So, in summary, the term healthy narcissism is a psychological oxymoron that dangerously conflates high self-esteem with a pervasive, destructive personality pattern characterized by a severe empathy deficit and chronic grandiosity. While we should all absolutely strive for high confidence, ambition, and self-advocacy, these powerful traits must be rigorously balanced by humility, genuine accountability, and a profound, consistent regard for the feelings and realities of others. Any attempt to package true narcissism as healthy ignores the profound, systemic interpersonal damage it causes over time. Focus on building an ego that is strong enough to accept failure, humble enough to apologize, and loving enough to truly connect with people. That's the real path to self-mastery and lasting well-being that benefits everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this important deep dive, everyone. This is such a crucial topic that impacts so many lives, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this complex distinction. Have you personally noticed this line blurring in the media, or maybe in your own professional life? Do you have examples of where confidence turned into something truly toxic and destructive? Let me know down in the comments below, and let's keep this important conversation going respectfully. If this discussion helped you clarify the crucial difference between true self-worth and destructive ego, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow and reach more people who need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into human behavior and psychology. And please share this video with someone who might benefit from this clarification today. I'll see all of you next time. Be safe and be well.